What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. So Batman Beyond is probably the best thing to come out of DC Rebirth right now. I mean, I love this story. It's so cool because to me it's a return to familiarity. All right, so here's the deal. When it comes to like people my age or even folks a little bit younger, for the most part, a lot of us got into comic books by way of TV shows. For me, it was X-Men the Animated Series. I got into comic books through X-Men the Animated Series, but I also loved Batman the Animated Series. I loved Justice League. Justice League and Justice League Unlimited was amazing. Superman the Animated Series was just as good. I'll never forget the episode when Superman masqueraded as Batman and beat the hell out of Bane. That was amazing because Bane was like, "What's going on here? You don't have super strength." It was really, really cool. But Batman Beyond was also a very, very popular show. Now, Terry McGinnis was not initially a comic book creation. He was an animated series creation. Eventually, he was rolled into the comic books, but the problem was that DC eventually moved towards the direction of getting rid of Terry McGinnis and replacing him with Tim Drake. Now, there were some people who liked it, but a lot of Batman Beyond fans hated it. They were so mad. They were like, "This sucks. This sucks so bad." Like they were so pissed off because they wanted Terry McGinnis. You know, they wanted the Batman Beyond that they knew instead of the Batman Beyond that they couldn't identify with, they didn't really care anything about. And that made sense just because of the fact that Tim Drake had his own history. It wasn't like Tim Drake was a newly created character designed to replace Terry McGinnis. Tim Drake had his own history. He was a Robin, he became Red Robin, he was a very prominent character in the DC landscape. And so for a lot of fans, it looked like DC was changing the status quo just for the heck of it, not because it served any real purpose. And so eventually what DC did is they rolled things back over and they basically gave us back Terry McGinnis. But in the interim, DC gave us a story called New 52 Future's End. And I would normally avoid talking about that story like the plague, but we kind of have to talk about it a little bit. The good thing is that the story really, really sucked, so we don't have to talk about it a lot. We could talk about it a tidbit here and there, but the great thing is that Batman Beyond Rebirth is designed to bring us back to the Batman Beyond that we're so familiar with. We get the little gags and jokes and different things like that, but we also get a little bit of an explanation, or really a pretty good explanation about what Terry McGinnis is about. Now, there are some aspects of the Batman mythos that don't really seem to be included here in Batman Beyond Rebirth. For example, the fact that in the show, Terry McGinnis was basically confirmed to be the child of Bruce Wayne. Now, it wasn't a child as though Bruce Wayne and a woman had a child together. It was really just that Terry McGinnis was created from Bruce Wayne's own DNA samples by Amanda Waller. And so because of that, he's kind of a kid, but not in the traditional raised by Bruce Wayne sort of offspring. But the fact remains that was very much a hallmark of his character. Now, to the best of my knowledge, DC is not going with that in this. I kind of figured if they were, they would have tied that in with Batman Beyond Rebirth. Now, time will tell if they choose to maintain that. Remember, Terry McGinnis came back in Batman Beyond Volume 5. And so because of that, I really want to say it was like 13 or 14, I think, when he regained the Batman Beyond mantle. But the idea here is that DC Rebirth is designed to basically refresh us with everything that's going on in the realm of Batman Beyond. And so because of that, we'll probably see them roll that back in again. But in terms of this story as it stands now, it is yet to be confirmed. And so what this does, though, is it really still kind of gives us a refresher in the sense that Terry McGinnis basically says, hey, you know, in his time, he was just a high school kid. You know, of course, this takes place in the future of the existing DC universe, but he was basically just a high school kid going about his normal life. He eventually got caught up with the Jokers, who were basically a gang that modeled themselves after the original Joker following his perceived death. And the result was that eventually he caught the attention of Bruce Wayne, who helped Terry to get out of a pretty dire situation. Now, while Bruce Wayne was effectively unconscious, Terry McGinnis stumbled into the Batcave and realized that Bruce Wayne was Batman. And so what this did is it set Terry on the path of becoming the new Batman. And the reason for this was because of the fact that Gotham had basically turned into a cesspool of sorts, in the sense that it was very Dark Knight Returns-esque in terms of how it functioned. Now, that's something else that I want to kind of draw your attention to. There are stories that take place in DC Comics that are so incredibly significant that they have ripple effects that go way into the future that in some form or fashion tie back into the original story. The Dark Knight Returns is much like that. The modern day iteration of Batman as a dark and broody character, pretty much the Batman that you're familiar with if you're reading his stories, that all came out of the Dark Knight Returns. It was that story that made Batman dark and broody and really had him going against Superman almost all the time whenever they first met after reboots and during, you know, subsequent stories if the story called for it. With Dark Knight Returns, what it also did is it basically gave us a future in Gotham where Batman had basically retired and the city had just fallen into almost complete and total chaos. I mean, it was really falling apart at the seams. The return to the Joker signified and really coincided with the return of Batman, and then following that, it was Batman and Carrie Kelly, who was operating as Robin, who were basically attempting to clean up the city of Gotham. Now, what this story does, Batman Beyond, it basically harkens back to that in the sense that with Batman having been retired, the city's just not what it used to be. It's a little more dangerous than it used to be. The Joker's gang is kind of running rampant. People don't necessarily stay out as late as they used to. And so because of that, Terry McGinnis undertaking the mantle of Batman as Batman Beyond was basically following the same standard of The Dark Knight Returns in terms of trying to clean up Gotham yet again. Now, what this does is it basically has Terry, going against the Joker's gang. And that's really the nature of this. It's just kind of picking things up, showing us what's going on. But it's also this realization that a couple of guys who have been taken by Barbara Gordon, who's now, running the Gotham police force, that those guys have basically succumbed to Joker toxin. And the reason why is because of the fact that, historically speaking, whenever the Joker's henchmen were captured, they would basically succumb to Joker toxin to keep them from talking. And so the indication here at the start of this story is that somehow the Joker has returned, or at least it's believed that he's returned. And so, of course, from here we pick up with Dana. Now, again, Dana was the love interest of Terry McGinnis in the cartoon show, as well as in the early days of the comics. The problem was that once Terry McGinnis was removed from the equation, the perception was that he was dead. Not only that, over the course of Terry McGinnis operating as Batman, he fell into the same trap as Bruce Wayne, in the sense that when Bruce Wayne was Batman, there wasn't time for romance. There wasn't time for love in his life. There was only time for him to raise sidekicks and to be a superhero. And so because of that, Terry McGinnis found a rift that was forming between Terry and Dana. And so what ended up happening is they more or less went their own separate ways. And then when he died, or at least when it was believed that he was dead, it changed the way that she saw things to a degree, but she kind of had to pick up the pieces and effectively move on. And so again, we're kind of given this little bit of a tour in terms of Batman Beyond's various sidekicks. Of course, Max, who's a close friend of his, Matt, his brother. And so these are basically people that know his identity, and they're really kind of like, Terry McGinnis's own version of Alfred, if that makes any sense. Not in the sense of like they tend to him and they cook and clean or anything like that, but in the sense that they're the people he confides in when it comes to trying to sort out a situation, trying to keep things under control. And so what this does is it actually brings Terry McGinnis, when he's traveling around, when he's trying to find Dana, it brings him into contact with what looks like a basically kind of a hybrid between like Bane, as we consider him, and a member of the Joker gang. And so again, this is really kind of like their strong guy, and it makes sense because in every comic you always have, in some group, you always have that one guy, whether it's the Secret Six, whether it is the Secret Society of Supervillains, whatever the case may be, there's always one or more strong guys who are basically the muscle of the group. And again, it just kind of, falls into play. But what we end up finding out is that Dana was basically taken by an old classmate of hers named Carter, who calls himself Terminal. And what Carter's doing is he's basically trying to resurrect the Joker. Now, this is kind of crazy here, and the reason why is because of the fact that Carter fancies himself as the more or less leader of the Joker's gang. But in Carter's mind, he kind of considers himself to be the smartest person who have ever lived. So almost like Batman Beyond's own version of Lex Luthor. But the overall gist here is that Carter believes, or at least seems to indicate here, that the Jokers, they need a legitimate leader. And what better person to resurrect than the Joker himself? Now, the other half of this is also just plain old, good old-fashioned hubris. It's really just Carter saying, hey, look, I'm the smartest person who's alive right now. If I'm going to do something to demonstrate how smart I am, why not resurrect someone? Now, the irony of all this is that if you watch the old Batman Beyond TV show, and if you really read any of the comics, the first thing to come to your mind when it was the Joker's group is if they were to resurrect the Joker, they have no idea what they're getting into. Like, they have no clue. And that's one of the funny things is because what happens, what's really going on here is how the Joker's gang views the Joker versus how the Joker really is. They view the Joker as this is a guy who will like bring us together and he'll take over Gotham and it'll be a good old time. It'll be party 24/7. It'll be amazing. What they don't know is that if the Joker were to be resurrected, he would send the entire city into a tailspin of insanity and chaos. He would literally just bring it all, crumbling down around them. And the Joker's group would rue the day that they resurrected the Joker. They would look to days gone by when the Joker was dead. And so again, it's almost like they have no idea what they're looking for, no idea what they're asking for. Now, of course, with Terry McGinnis having gone off to face this Bane-ified version of the Joker's group, what this does is it, of course, has the two of them fighting, and he's basically buried in rubble. But Matt and Max basically work to try to, restore communications. Terry McGinnis more or less frees himself, and that's really the end of that. That's really going to be one one of the weird things about this story is for the first couple issues or so, there's not much doing. It's pretty straightforward, it's pretty basic, not a whole lot of room for discussion or, any real kind of analysis, but at the very least, it does, again, continue to give us this idea of what Terry McGinnis goes through. Keep in mind that he's really just now stepping back into the realm of becoming Batman Beyond. So because of that, he's still a little hazy. He's not necessarily as great as he used to be. And so because of that, he's still relearning how to become Batman again. He's relearning how to use the suit effectively. And that's one of the things that makes sense here. A lot of times in the realm of comic books, a character will die and then come back and they'll be just as good as they ever was. It doesn't beg any question in terms of how they function. Captain America is a really good example. Captain America was thought to have been killed following his conflict with Baron Zemo. He was frozen for 20 years. He was thawed out after he was discovered by the Avengers, and it was business as usual. There was no, Captain America in the comic books relearning how to be Captain America, relearning his enhanced agility, his enhanced speed, reflexes, strength, so on and so forth. It was just, he can do everything he was able to do before. The great thing about this, about Batman Beyond Rebirth, is that following, the return of Terry McGinnis, he has to relearn these things. And so that's one of the reasons why it makes this story so cool and so grounded, is because what it does is it allows DC to pick this story up and show Terry McGinnis struggling to be Batman against, these various forces. Now, that was usually always the case with Terry McGinnis. It was really kind of like this Spider-Man situation in the sense that he was trying to balance his own personal life with the life of being Batman. For Bruce Wayne, it wasn't really that way. For Bruce Wayne, it was really just like, hey, I'll put on a show for the city of Gotham while I'm masquerading around as Bruce Wayne, but a bulk of my time is spent in the realm of just being a superhero, being Batman. Now, in the older comics, it was like that to a degree where he was trying to find love and, Silver St. Cloud, different things like that. But the idea here is that in this particular story, and really in the modern day, Batman doesn't really have that quagmire. The only real struggle he has is how he deals with the Bat family. So Jason Todd, Damian Wayne, Dick Grayson, Barbara Gordon, Batwoman, Kate Kane, how he deals with those individuals basically is kind of like a stand-in for if he were to have to struggle with his own personal life. But that's one of the other reasons why people loved Terry McGinnis so much, is because he was a reflection of the viewer at the time. A lot of us have conflicting responsibilities. We want to date, but we have trust issues. We want to go out and socialize with our friends, but we've got homework. There are a lot of things that people try to deal with in their daily lives that present conflicting situations. And so that's one of the reasons why a lot of people enjoyed Terry McGinnis. I kind of wanted to just throw that out there, but the fact remains here is that, again, much like the Dark Knight Returns, where a lot of neighborhoods had been overrun by different gangs, here in Batman Beyond, there's a huge section of Gotham that's basically called Joker's Town, where it's basically just run by people who were part of the Joker's gang. Now, this is also kind of a throwback to the old school movie, The Wanderers. I don't know if any of you guys saw that, but there was a gang called the Ducky Boys, I think it was, and their gang was like 200 strong or something like that. They were the biggest gang in town. This is very similar to that in the sense that it's the Joker's gang being the biggest gang in town, the one gang that everybody wants to be a part of just because there's safety in numbers and they can kind of do what they want to, and the police in Gotham are barely keeping up as it is. But the fact remains here that with him making his escape and, basically able to fend off against these various members of the Jokers and then, engineer his escape and get away, what he ends up doing is he actually ends up donning a Joker's costume for himself. Now, this is cool. This is one of the really cool things about this, is because this is the natural progression of Terry McGinnis, right? I mean, when it came to Bruce Wayne fighting crime in Gotham City, he wasn't always doing it as Batman. He wasn't always doing it as just the guy who runs around in a suit and beats people up. Batman had several identities, but the most notable was a guy named Matches Malone. And Matches Malone would allow Bruce Wayne to basically function as part of the criminal underground, gain information, gain intel in order to take out various facets of the criminal underground, or to get a better understanding of what was going on with the various criminals if he wasn't able to access that information as Batman. And so what ends up happening here is Terry McGinnis basically puts on the costume of this Joker and then is going to go forward as part of the Joker's gang and actually present himself as the child of Matches Malone. But from here, what we do is we switch back over to Carter and we get this modified, this sort of updated version of what had happened between Batman and the Joker that led to the perceived death of the Joker in the first place. And what we end up finding out here is that in this particular story, it was basically a fight on Christmas. I mean, that's really what it was. It was a fight at the end of the holiday season or during the holiday season. And while Gotham City was resting and preparing for, the day of opening presents, Batman and Joker were basically engaged in a fight that would have led to, that would have determined the future of Gotham City, in the sense that there was a dirty bomb that had been planted within Gotham, and if detonated, would have killed a multitude of people. Now, because of this, Batman was able to fend off against the Joker, but in the midst of this massive explosion, there didn't seem to be anything left of the Joker himself, in the sense that he was basically damaged or he was hit by a vehicle, and everybody believed that he had effectively been killed during this situation. Now, what Carter does is he comes back and says where everybody believed that the Joker had been killed in this massive crash between, the Joker and a train, that what ended up happening, or at least what seems to have happened is some members of Joker's group had basically grabbed his body, whisked him away, and then threw him into cryostasis, where they just kept him there until a point where he could be revived. Now, again, this also coincides with Terry McGinnis showing up at the Joker's, base of operations disguised as a member of their gang themselves. Now, again, of course, he's working alongside Matt and Max here, and so it's really just him firing off a rocket, in front of all the other members of the Joker's group, and then, presumably destroying the Batwing. Now, of course, this is basically just Matt and Max blowing up the Batwing at the right time in order to make it look like Terry McGinnis destroyed it, but this is the way in which Terry manages to step his foot inside of the Joker's group. Now, what he basically says is his name is Trey Malone. He's the son of Matches Malone. Matches Malone basically bailed out on the family when he was younger, and this fits in perfectly with the Matches Malone concept. But the funny thing behind this is that at the end of the day, while Terry McGinnis is interesting, while people love Terry McGinnis as a character, he's no Bruce Wayne. And we're gonna find out just how far from Bruce Wayne he is as we make our way through this story. But again, getting inside the Joker's gang hideout, this is also the first time that Dana's beginning to realize that Terry McGinnis is actually alive. She had believed him to be dead. And this is cool because one of the great things about this story is that it basically sees a wholesale return to the familiarity of what we're used to with the Batman Beyond mythos. I think I said Batman Returns earlier, but it's a wholesale return to the Batman Beyond mythos, but it's also just kind of this cool situation. Like, will Terry and Dana get back together again? And that's one of the things that a lot of people in the Batman Beyond landscape didn't really care for, is the idea that Terry and Dana were more or less broken up. I mean, it seemed kind of normal given the circumstance that he was in. Like we said, the fact that he was focusing more on being Batman than he was on his personal relationships. But seeing the struggle between the two, seeing them trying to work things out, was an interesting aspect of the character. But to see them come back together again, to see them function as kind of a duo in terms of, superhero and then boyfriend and girlfriend, would actually fit in pretty well. And of course, Terry basically manages to get Dana on her own and say, hey, look, yes, I'm alive. Yes, we'll sort things out. I'll explain everything later on. But what we'll do for now is you're going to have to play along. You're going to have to basically act like I'm a member of the Joker group. You're going to have to be terrified of me. We'll get things sorted out later. Now, of course, what ends up happening is that Dana also shows Terry McGinnis that Carter is intending to bring back the Joker. And again, this is when Terry begins to realize things are dangerous. But the ironic thing about this is that Terry was not prominent when the Joker was alive. And so because of that, Terry doesn't even really know the danger of the Joker. And that's going to be a funny thing once we get towards the end of this too. And that's what I also love about the story, is because it's really kind of constantly hitting home with how dangerous the Joker is. The only one who really knows how dangerous he is Bruce Wayne. And Bruce Wayne's presumably dead. I mean, he died during the events of Future's End, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. What we do here is we switch back over to Carter, and this is when we get this huge, massive bomb. Of course, the funny thing about this is that this entire conversation is taking place in front of the janitor, and the reason why this is important is because this is basically Carter just kind of showing his hubris in the sense that, he doesn't really treat the people who work for him, doesn't treat them with any real measure of respect. And as we know, when it comes to any leader, this always ends up being their downfall. The people that they effectively rule over will turn against them if they're not being treated adequately. And so because of this, as Carter is having this conversation with the corpse of the Joker, what we end up finding out is that this is not the corpse of the Joker. This is the corpse of Bruce Wayne. That Bruce Wayne is effectively alive. He's just being kept in a sedated state. Now, the question that has to be asked here is how? How is Bruce Wayne alive? And that's the crazy thing about all this, is because this is when we start to transition over to our discussion about Future's End. So Future's End was a story that was not very well received. I mean, the first issue didn't even do that well. And by the time the thing came to an end, people were just like, all right, can we just pretend that didn't happen? But what ended up happening at Future's End is basically the AI that had been created by Batman called Brother Eye had more or less run amok and transformed a majority of the world's superheroes into cyborgs. Now, that discussion about Brother Eye, we can kind of run over that for right now. We can kind of put that on hold. And the reason why is because of the fact that on Sunday, I think it is, as part of our video, or part of our lead up to Infinite Crisis, we're going to cover the OMAC project. And what that does is basically answer every question that you have about Brother Eye, about how Brother Eye went amok, how it was taken over by Maxwell Lord, why Batman created it, all that kind of good stuff. It's going to cover all that. So for right now, we can really just kind of say that Brother Eye was an orbital satellite system that Batman had created for the purpose of monitoring life on Earth, monitoring all the different metahumans and all that kind of good stuff. But eventually it ran amok, and then it basically led to what was going to be an post-apocalyptic future. And so the result was that Gotham City had basically had this cloaking device that would keep it hidden from Brother Eye, but eventually the cyborgs managed to break their way in, managed to attack Gotham itself, and the result was that in the conflict, Bruce Wayne was one of the many people who were injured. The problem with this is that Bruce Wayne was not known to be Bruce Wayne at the time. Instead, because of the fact that the city of Gotham had basically been assaulted in such an extreme way, that what ended up happening is that there was no time to identify people. It was basically just bring in bodies. Can they live? Yes, move them on. Are they going to die? Put them over there. And that was it. I mean, it was an assembly line of tending to the wounded. And so they weren't going through these extreme steps to test the DNA of people or to test their fingerprints or confirm their identities. All they were doing is just checking to see if they had a pulse, seeing what their likelihood of survival was, and then moving them on. And so what ended up happening here is Carter, as one of the people who were injured, realized that that person was Bruce Wayne. He took Bruce Wayne away, disguised Bruce Wayne as the Joker, and then basically fancied himself to be a person who was bringing the Joker back and then rally the Joker's gang around himself. And so that was basically how he managed to consolidate power unto his own. Now, this revelation also coincides with Terry McGinnis alongside Matt and Dana realizing that Bruce Wayne is alive. And so because of this, what this does is it shifts Terry McGinnis' focus to save Bruce Wayne so they can bring him back and they can restore him back to the way he was before. Now, of course, this whole situation in terms of Carter basically taking the body of Bruce Wayne and so on and so forth, in addition to consolidating power under himself as leader of the Joker's gang, it was also designed to allow him to gain access to Keystone. Now, Keystone was kind of like this revamped concept of Brother Eye in the sense that instead of just really monitoring metahumans, Keystone was an intel gathering base of operations. And so what this would do if Carter were to gain access to it is it would literally allow him to tap into Keystone and then basically turn into a guy who could just blackmail anybody with any amount of information. And so because of this, it would also allow him to, access bank accounts and all kinds of different stuff. It's your traditional nefarious act by a villain. But the funny thing about this is that because Carter, again, because he's so arrogant, because he has so much hubris, he's effectively just kind of spewing all this at the janitor, which is really kind of weird, but it also sort of makes sense, kind of falling in line with his character as he's been shown so far. Now, of course, using the body of Bruce Wayne, of course, as he's taken it to basically gain access to Keystone, with Terry McGinnis realizing that Bruce Wayne was alive and putting two and two together, right off the bat, his mind went to the idea that Carter was trying to access Keystone. Now, of course, if Carter were to access this, again, it would make him an extremely dangerous person because, as we know, knowledge is power. And so with all the information that he would have at his disposal, he could effectively take the world by storm in a lot of different ways. But, with him and Terry McGinnis fighting, it's actually kind of cool to see. It's a regular battle. There's really not a whole lot to be had here. What is important is that while the two of them are fighting, the janitor begins talking to the body of Bruce Wayne, of course, pulling out the chemicals that are designed to subdue Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne begins to come to, and the janitor simply begins saying things like, "It's time to wake up, old friend. I want you to see what's going on right now." And so the indication here is that the janitor and Batman, or I guess the janitor and Bruce Wayne, know who the other is. Now, the other funny thing about this is that the janitor ends up taking the body of Bruce Wayne and pushing it over, basically pushing it over the edge. Now, what the indication here is that the janitor has something, has more knowledge than we would think he would, that it doesn't actually seems to be the case. Instead, the janitor looks like he's basically just kind of buying time. He's creating a distraction that would allow for himself and Carter to get out of there. Now, the reason for this is because of the fact that Carter's just a normal guy. This janitor is just a normal guy. The two of them do not have the ability to go toe-to-toe with Batman Beyond. And so because of this, it's really just making the smart move. It's creating a distraction to get while the getting's good. Now, of course, with Terry McGinnis knowing this is Bruce Wayne, his first act, his initial guess here is to grab Bruce Wayne and save his life. And that really seems to be what the janitor was betting on. The funny thing is that throughout this entire time, Bruce Wayne basically says, "Look, you can't save me. You let me fall. You have to go get the janitor." And the reason why is because as the two of them are talking, Bruce keeps trying to interrupt Terry and saying, "Look, you have to go find Terminal. You have to go find the janitor." The two of them are extremely dangerous in this situation. Now, as Bruce tries to explain this, Terry keeps saying, "Hey, look, man, chill, relax. We got it all sorted out. Terminal, he's not going to be able to do anything now. He can't access Keystone. We know you're not the Joker, so the Joker is still dead." And Batman says, "Actually, he's not." And so what we do is we transition back over to Carter and the janitor, only for Carter to continue his rant on how smart he is and so on and so forth. And this is when the janitor says, "Nobody invokes the name of the Joker. To do that is crazy. Only a crazy person would invoke the name of the Joker." And as he starts beating, Carter to death with a crowbar, the janitor takes off his hat and hood to reveal that he himself is the Joker. So the Joker is alive in Batman Beyond. And this is amazing. It's the return of the Joker. Dude, oh my God. I was trying to build that up. I was trying to to throw you guys off the trail. I hope I did a good job. I hope it's one of those things where you were like, really? The Joker's alive? Oh my God. But it's such a cool revelation. And that's why I love this story so much, is because the Joker's back now. And again, this creates an insanely dangerous situation, because now it's going to be Terry McGinnis who's going to have to face off against the original Joker for the first time, really for the time that matters the most, because if the Joker starts rallying people to his cause, there's no telling what he's going to do. But with that being said, guys, if you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.